24 million followers watch his every move online. Brand deals worth millions. A tech empire that changed lives across the globe. But on the most important day of his life, Dante Harris sat completely alone, while hundreds of graduates celebrated around him, snapping photos and hugging family members. This paralyzed TikTok millionaire found himself invisible in a crowd of thousands. The same wheelchair that never stopped him from building an empire suddenly felt like a barrier between him and everyone else. You see, success has a cruel way of fooling us. We think money, fame, and followers equal happiness. We believe that reaching the top means we'll finally belong. But what happens when you achieve everything society says you should want, yet still feel like an outsider looking in? Dante thought graduation day would be his victory lap. 4 years of college while managing a multi-million-dollar business, inspiring disabled people worldwide, and becoming one of the most influential voices on social media. This was supposed to be his moment to shine. Instead, he wheeled through campus watching classmates pose for photos he'd never be invited into. He heard whispers that weren't quite conversations. He felt stares that weren't quite welcoming. Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people? Have you ever achieved something incredible, only to realize you're celebrating alone? That crushing loneliness that success was supposed to cure, but somehow made worse? For Dante, this wasn't just another bad day. This was the moment when years of pushing forward, of motivating millions, of proving everyone wrong about what disabled people could accomplish. All of it felt meaningless without someone genuine to share it with. But here's where this story takes a turn that shocked everyone, including Dante himself. A single mother attending her daughter's graduation noticed him sitting alone. What she did next would spark a global movement, change how millions of people see disability, and prove that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest transformations. If you've ever felt alone despite your achievements, if you've ever wondered whether success is worth it when you have nobody to celebrate with, hit that like button right now. Because you're about to witness how one unexpected moment of human connection changed not just one man's life, but inspired a worldwide revolution of kindness. This is a story of how a paralyzed TikTok influencer millionaire discovered that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or fame. It's the courage to see someone who feels unseen. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at success the same way again. To understand how Dante Harris became the man sitting alone at graduation, we need to go back to when he was 18 years old, a completely different person with completely different dreams. Dante was that kid everyone knew would make it big. Star athlete, scholarship offers pouring in from Division I schools, the kind of natural charisma that made teachers remember his name and coaches fight over his talent. Basketball wasn't just his sport. It was his identity, his future, his ticket to everything he'd ever wanted. The night that changed everything started like any other. Friday game, packed gymnasium, college scouts in the stands taking notes. Dante had just scored his career-high 32 points when his phone buzzed with a text from his girlfriend asking him to come over. The drive was routine. Same route he'd taken hundreds of times. 15 minutes of singing along to music, replaying the game's highlights in his head. Already planning his weekend. Then, in a split second that lasted forever, everything went black. When Dante woke up 3 days later, the first thing he noticed wasn't the hospital room or the concerned faces surrounding his bed. It was a complete silence below his waist. No feeling, no movement, nothing. Paralyzed from the waist down, the doctor said, as if those 6 words could somehow capture the destruction of every dream Dante had ever held. No more basketball. No more scholarships. No more being the person everyone expected great things from. The next 6 months were the darkest of his life. While his former teammates celebrated their college commitments and his ex-girlfriend moved on with someone who could still walk, Dante found himself trapped in a body that no longer felt like his own. Physical therapy was torture, not because of the pain, he couldn't feel much of that anymore, but because every exercise reminded him of what he'd lost. Every small achievement felt meaningless compared to what he used to be capable of. His friends tried to visit at first, but the conversations were awkward, filled with careful words and pitying looks that made him feel like a charity case. Eventually, they stopped coming altogether. Life moved on without him. That's when Dante discovered something that would change everything: his phone's camera and an app called TikTok. It started as a joke, really. Stuck in his bedroom, bored out of his mind, he recorded himself attempting to transfer from his bed to his wheelchair and failing spectacularly. Instead of deleting it, something made him add a caption: "When you're still figuring out this whole wheelchair thing and gravity wins again." He posted it without thinking, went to sleep, and woke up to something he hadn't experienced in months. People laughing with him, not at him. The video had 12,000 views and hundreds of comments. But these weren't the careful, walking on eggshells responses he'd grown accustomed to. People were genuinely entertained. Some shared their own stories. Others asked questions about his experience with real curiosity instead of uncomfortable sympathy. For the first time since the accident, Dante felt like himself again. He started posting daily. Workouts modified for wheelchair users. Reviews of accessibility fails at local restaurants. Comedy sketches about the ridiculous things people said to him in public. Each video was authentic, unfiltered, and refreshingly honest about both the struggles and absurdities of his new reality. The response was incredible. His follower count climbed from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands. But more importantly, he was building something he hadn't had since the accident: a community. Comments poured in from people with disabilities who felt seen for the first time, from able-bodied viewers who gained perspective they never had, from parents of disabled children who found hope in his humor and resilience. Within a year, Dante had reached his first 1,000,000 followers. Brand partnerships started rolling in. Companies wanted him to promote everything from wheelchairs to energy drinks. But what really excited him were the messages from viewers saying his content had changed their lives. A teenage girl who'd been in a car accident similar to his wrote that his videos gave her the courage to go back to school. A father whose son was born with spina bifida thanked him for showing what was possible. A woman dealing with depression said his posts were the only thing that made her smile some days. Dante realized he'd found something more valuable than any basketball scholarship: the power to impact lives on a massive scale. But here's what nobody saw behind the camera, the part he never posted about. Despite building this incredible online community, despite the financial success that followed, despite becoming an inspiration to millions, Dante was still that lonely kid in the hospital room, wondering if anyone would ever see him as more than his disability. Success had given him purpose, but it hadn't given him connection. Fame had brought him followers, but not friends. Money had solved his financial problems, but it couldn't buy the thing he wanted most: someone to genuinely care about the person behind the wheelchair. Drop a heart in the comments if you believe in turning pain into purpose, because Dante's story is just getting started. What happened next went beyond anything Dante could have dreamed of when he first picked up that phone camera. His TikTok success was just the beginning of something much bigger. By age 21, Dante had transformed from a college student making videos in his dorm room to the CEO of his own company. But this wasn't just another influencer launching a merchandise line or hawking supplements. Dante saw a real problem that nobody else was addressing. Every day, his comment section filled with messages from disabled people struggling with technology that wasn't built for them. Smartphones without proper voice controls. Gaming controllers impossible to use with limited hand mobility. Smart home devices that couldn't understand the speech patterns of people with certain conditions. The tech industry was leaving millions of people behind, and Dante decided to do something about it. He founded Adaptive Solutions with a simple mission: create technology that works for everyone, not just the able-bodied majority. His first product was a gaming controller designed specifically for users with limited mobility, something that could be operated entirely with head movements and eye tracking. The gaming community went absolutely wild for it, not just disabled gamers, but streamers and content creators who saw how innovative the technology was. Orders flooded in faster than Dante could fulfill them. Within 18 months, Adaptive Solutions had expanded to smartphone accessories, smart home integrations, and even experimental technology for people with visual impairments. Major tech companies started reaching out, wanting to license his innovations. The business exploded. Revenue hit 7 figures in year 2. By year 3, Dante was pulling in multiple millions annually between his company, brand partnerships, speaking engagements, and his ever-growing social media empire. He moved into a custom-built smart home designed with universal accessibility principles. Every surface, every control, every feature was optimized for wheelchair users while remaining beautiful and functional for anyone. Architecture magazines featured it on their covers. But here's the strange thing about success at this level. It creates its own kind of isolation. Dante's days became packed with board meetings, investor calls, product development sessions, and content creation schedules. His social media team managed most of his posting now, though he still appeared in every video. His assistant handled his calendar. His accountant managed his finances. His publicist controlled his image. He had employees, advisors, business partners, and millions of fans. But friends? Real friends who knew him as Dante, not as the paralyzed TikTok millionaire or the inspiring CEO? Those were harder to find. Dating became complicated, too. Every relationship felt tainted by questions about motivations. Did they like him or his fame? Were they attracted to his personality or his bank account? The few relationships he attempted fizzled out under the weight of these uncertainties. His college experience reflected this strange duality. In business classes, professors used his company as a case study for successful entrepreneurship. Students knew who he was, but that recognition came a wall of assumptions and expectations that made genuine connections nearly impossible. Dante found himself living in two completely different worlds. Online, he was confident, funny, inspirational, surrounded by millions of people who loved him. Offline, he often felt like an outsider looking in, successful but fundamentally alone. The irony wasn't lost on him. He built a business around inclusion and accessibility, yet he couldn't seem to access the most basic human need, authentic relationships. As graduation approached, Dante had everything he thought he wanted: financial security for life, a business that was changing the world, recognition from industry leaders and government officials, speaking requests from major universities and conferences. But walking, or rather wheeling, across that graduation stage felt different than he'd expected. Instead of the triumphant moment he'd envisioned, it felt like just another performance for people who saw his accomplishments, but not him. His parents would be there, of course, proud beyond measure. His business team planned to document the day for social media content. There would be photos, congratulations, maybe even local news coverage. Yet something was missing. That feeling of belonging, of being celebrated not just for what he'd achieved, but for who he was as a person. The kind of genuine human connection that money can't buy and fame can't create. Little did Dante know, graduation day would deliver something he never expected. Not in the form of an award or recognition, but through the simple act of a stranger who would change everything. If you're building something meaningful, smash that subscribe button. Because what happens next shows that sometimes the most powerful moments come from the most unexpected places. May 15th was supposed to be different. Dante had been looking forward to this day for 4 years, not just as he ended his college journey, but as proof that he conquered every obstacle life had thrown at him. The morning started with the usual routine his assistant had perfected. Custom-tailored graduation gown altered to fit properly over his wheelchair. Professional photographer booked to capture behind-the-scenes content for his social media channels. Hair and makeup team ensuring he looked perfect for the inevitable interviews and photo opportunities. But as Dante wheeled toward the university auditorium, something felt off. The excitement he'd expected was replaced by an uncomfortable knot in his stomach. The campus was buzzing with families setting up elaborate photo shoots. Proud parents adjusting caps and gowns, siblings holding "Congrats, graduate" signs, grandparents beaming with joy. Everywhere he looked, graduates were surrounded by their people, the ones who supported them through late-night study sessions, celebrated their victories, and encouraged them through failures. Dante's parents had flown in from across the country, of course. They'd be sitting in the designated family section, probably live streaming the ceremony for his followers. His business team would be there too, documenting everything for content. But somehow, despite all these people who would be cheering for him, he felt profoundly alone. As he entered the staging area where graduates were lining up, the familiar dance began. Heads turned when people recognized him. Whispered conversations started nearby, not malicious, but not inclusive either. "That's the TikTok guy," someone murmured behind him. "The one with the tech company." Another voice added, "How much do you think he's worth?" They talked about him like he couldn't hear them, like he was a celebrity sighting rather than their classmate. Some pulled out phones to discreetly record him, probably hoping to catch content they could share later. A few approached him directly, but the conversations felt scripted. Compliments about his inspiring story, questions about his business success, requests for selfies that would boost their own social media profiles. Nobody asked how he was feeling about graduating, or what his plans were beyond the public knowledge, or whether he was nervous about giving the student speaker address later. The ceremony itself was a blur of formalities when his name was called. Dante Harris, Bachelor of Business Administration, summa cum laude, founder and CEO of Adaptive Solutions. The applause was thunderous. He wheeled across the stage, accepted his diploma, and smiled for the cameras. But even in that moment of triumph, surrounded by thousands of people celebrating his achievement, he felt disconnected. The applause felt directed at his accomplishments, not at him as a person. The cheers were for the inspirational story, the successful business, the social media phenomenon, not for Dante, the young man who'd worked incredibly hard to get here. After the ceremony, while other graduates rushed to find their families for photos and celebration dinners, Dante found himself sitting at the edge of the courtyard. His parents were networking with other families, excited to share stories about their successful son. His team was already editing footage for social media posts. He watched clusters of friends planning their evening celebrations, couples sharing intimate moments of pride, families gathering for group photos that would hang in living rooms for decades. The joy around him felt genuine and warm, but also completely separate from his experience. This wasn't how he'd envisioned this day during those dark months after his accident. Back then, he dreamed of graduation as the ultimate vindication, proof that he could achieve anything despite his disability. He'd succeeded beyond his wildest expectations, but the victory felt hollow. Nobody really knew him here. They knew his story, his statistics, his public persona. But the person behind all of that success, the one who still sometimes woke up forgetting he couldn't walk, who worried about whether people liked him for who he was, who craved genuine connection more than any business deal, that person remained invisible. Then something happened that would spark a movement nobody saw coming. Amara Lewis had never planned on being at this graduation ceremony. At 38, she was supposed to be working her second job at the local diner, serving coffee to truck drivers and late-shift workers who tipped in quarters and crumpled dollar bills. But today was different. Today, her daughter Zoe was graduating magna cum laude with a degree in social work, the first person in their family to ever finish college. Amara had sacrificed everything to make this moment possible. She'd worked 3 jobs some semesters, skipped meals to pay for textbooks, and spent countless nights helping Zoe with homework while fighting exhaustion from 14-hour workdays. When Zoe's father left when she was 7, promising child support that never came, Amara became both parents overnight. The fancy family surrounding her in the auditorium made her self-conscious about her department store dress and borrowed purse. She didn't belong in this world of professional photography sessions and designer handbags. But watching her daughter walk across that stage made every struggle worth it. After the ceremony, while other families headed to expensive celebration dinners, Amara and Zoe planned to grab burgers at their favorite spot, the same place they'd celebrated Zoe's high school graduation, her first college acceptance letter, and every small victory in between. As they walked through the courtyard, Amara noticed him immediately, a young man in a wheelchair, sitting alone near the edge of the celebration area. While families swarmed around other graduates, he seemed to exist in his own bubble of quiet isolation. She recognized something in his posture, the way his shoulders carried invisible weight, the forced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Amara knew that look. She'd worn it herself during those early years as a single mother, when well-meaning people offered sympathy instead of understanding, when she felt like the world saw her as a cautionary tale rather than a whole person. "Mom, that's Dante Harris," Zoe whispered, pulling out her phone. "He's huge on TikTok. Should we get a selfie?" But Mara wasn't thinking about social media or celebrity status. She was thinking about the young man who looked the way she had felt so many times, successful on paper, but fundamentally alone, You go ahead to the car, honey, Amara told her daughter. I'll be right there. Zoe looked confused but didn't argue. She'd learned to trust her mother's instincts about people over the years. Amara approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd expected. Probably not much older than Zoe. Despite his obvious success, despite the expensive suit and professional styling, there was something vulnerable about him that reminded her of her own daughter during her most uncertain moments. Mind if I sit? She asked, gesturing to the empty bench beside him. Dante looked up, surprised. Most people who approached him had that calculated look of someone wanting something. A photo, a business card, a moment in time they could later brag about. This woman's eyes held something different. Genuine warmth without agenda. Of course, he said, wheeling closer to make room. Congratulations on your graduation, Amara said simply. That was quite an introduction they gave you up there. Thank you, Dante replied, automatically falling into his public persona. Are you here for someone special? My daughter Zoe. She just graduated too. Amara's voice filled with unmistakable pride. 22 years old and already changing the world through social work. I couldn't be more proud. Something in the way she talked about her daughter, without mentioning achievements or accolades, just pure maternal love, made Dante's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. That's amazing, he said, and for the first time all day, his response felt completely genuine. She's lucky to have someone who believes in her like that. Amara studied his face for a moment. You know, success can be lonely sometimes, especially when people see what you've accomplished instead of who you are. The words hit Dante like a physical blow. How did this stranger understand exactly what he'd been feeling? How did you, he started to ask. What she did next shocked everyone watching. For the next 20 minutes, Dante and Amara talked like they'd known each other for years. She told him about raising Zoe alone, about the nights when she'd fall asleep at the kitchen table grading papers from her part-time tutoring job while Zoe did homework beside her, about the fear that she wasn't enough, that her daughter deserved better than hand-me-down clothes and generic cereal. Dante shared things he'd never said in any interview, how success had made him feel more isolated, not less. How he sometimes missed the simplicity of his early TikTok days, when his biggest worry was whether a video would get a few thousand views. How he wondered if anyone would care about him if his business disappeared tomorrow. You know what's funny? Amara said, watching families slowly dispersing around them. I spent years thinking I wasn't good enough for Zoe. Not educated enough. Not wealthy enough. Not sophisticated enough. But she turned out better than I ever dared to hope. That's because you loved her, Dante said quietly. Not what she might become or what she might achieve. Just her. Amara nodded, studying his face. When's the last time someone saw you that way? The question hung in the air between them. Dante opened his mouth to give his usual deflection, but something about Amara's presence made pretense impossible. Instead, tears he'd been holding back for months started to fall. I can't remember, he admitted. As the ceremony area began to empty, Dante realized this conversation would end soon. Amara would return to her life. He'd return to his, and this moment of genuine human connection would become just a memory. I should probably let you get back to your daughter, he said, trying to regain his composure. Amara stood up slowly, then did something that completely caught him off guard. She stepped closer to his wheelchair and gently placed her hands on either side of his face. What you've built is incredible, she said softly. But what you are, the person sitting here right now, that's what matters most. Then she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. That's for being brave enough to keep going, she whispered. Not brave because of what you've overcome, but brave because you're still hoping for a real connection in a world that often sees you as a symbol instead of a person. Dante sat frozen, overwhelmed by the unexpected tenderness of the gesture. When was the last time someone had touched him with such genuine affection? Not a business handshake or a photo op embrace, but real human warmth that expected nothing in return? Thank you, he managed to say, his voice breaking slightly. Amara stepped back and smiled. Take care of yourself, Dante. And remember, the right people will see you for who you are not what you've accomplished. She walked away to find Zoe, leaving Dante alone with emotions he hadn't felt in years. That evening, back in his perfectly designed smart home, Dante couldn't stop thinking about the interaction. He'd built his entire brand on authenticity, on showing the real side of living with a disability. But when was the last time he'd been truly authentic about his deepest need? Not for success or recognition, but for someone to simply care. He picked up his phone and started recording the way he had hundreds of times before. But this video was different. "Hey everyone," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "I want to tell you about something that happened today that reminded me why human connection matters more than any business deal or brand partnership ever could." He told him about Amara, about her simple act of kindness, about how a stranger's gesture had touched him more deeply than years of professional success. He talked about loneliness, about the difference between being celebrated and being seen, about how vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the foundation of real relationships. "I've spent years showing you how to adapt and overcome," he said, looking directly into the camera. "But today someone reminded me that the most important adaptation isn't learning to live with disability. It's learning to ask for and accept genuine human connection." He posted the video without his team's usual review process. Within hours, something extraordinary started happening. The comments weren't the typical mix of inspiration and pity he'd grown accustomed to. Instead, people began sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness, moments when strangers had seen them as human beings instead of labels or limitations. But this was just the beginning of something much bigger. If this gave you chills, you know what to do with that like button, because what happened next changed everything. Within 6 hours of posting that video, Dante's phone crashed from notifications. The response wasn't just overwhelming. It was unlike anything he'd experienced in his years of content creation. This wasn't his usual audience of disabled individuals and allies sharing typical supportive comments. This was something entirely different. Comments poured in from people of every background imaginable. A military veteran wrote about a grocery store clerk who helped him during a panic attack without treating him like a broken soldier. A teenage girl with severe acne shared how a classmate complimented her smile instead of looking away. An elderly man described how a young barista learned sign language just to take his order properly. But what struck Dante most were the stories from people who'd never considered themselves part of any marginalized community. Able-bodied individuals sharing moments when someone saw past their job title, their appearance, their circumstances to recognize their humanity. By morning, the hashtag Kiss of Courage was trending worldwide. The name came from one of the first reshares, a mother in Ohio who wrote, "Sometimes all we need is someone brave enough to see us. Thank you for reminding us that courage isn't just overcoming obstacles. It's having the courage to truly see another person." Within 48 hours, the movement exploded beyond social media into real-world action. A college in Texas organized See Me Days where students with disabilities shared their stories not as inspiration, but as ordinary humans with complex lives and dreams. Instead of the usual overcoming adversity narrative, they talked about their favorite movies, their career goals, their relationships, the full spectrum of human experience. High schools across the country started programs pairing students with and without disabilities as study partners, not for community service credits, but for genuine friendship building. The focus wasn't on helping or being helped. It was on mutual connection and understanding. Coffee shops began training baristas in basic sign language and disability etiquette, not because it was mandated, but because the hashtag Kiss of Courage movement had shown how small gestures of inclusion created profound impact. But the movement grew beyond disability awareness entirely. Offices implemented human-first policies where colleagues shared personal struggles alongside professional achievements. Instead of networking events focused on career advancement, companies hosted connection gatherings where people talk about their fears, hopes, and authentic selves. Dating apps added features encouraging users to share vulnerabilities alongside their accomplishments. Mental health advocates used the hashtag to normalize conversations about depression, anxiety, and therapy. The elderly community embraced the movement powerfully. Nursing homes shared videos of residents discussing their rich histories, their ongoing dreams, and their perspectives on modern life. not as cute viral content, but as recognition of their continued relevance and wisdom. 3 weeks after Dante's video, something incredible happened. Amara Lewis, the single mother whose simple gesture had started everything, was tracked down by a local news station. The interview was supposed to be a feel-good human interest piece. Instead, it became a masterclass in genuine humility and wisdom. I didn't do anything special, Amara said, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I just saw a young man who looked lonely and treated him like I'd want my daughter to be treated. That's not heroic. That's just being human. The interviewer pressed her about the global movement her action had inspired. If something good came from it, I'm glad, she replied. But I hope people understand that you don't need cameras or hashtags to see someone. You just need to care enough to look past the surface. Dante saw the interview and immediately reached out to Amara. Their reunion, documented on both their social media accounts, wasn't staged or scripted. It was two people genuinely happy to reconnect. But Amara brought something to their second meeting that surprised everyone, a proposal. She'd been researching disability inclusion programs at universities and discovered how inadequate most of them were. They focus on accommodation, she told Dante, but not on actual social integration. Students with disabilities get the resources they need to succeed academically, but they're still eating lunch alone. Together, they launched the See Me Campus Initiative, not as another disability awareness program, but as a comprehensive approach to building genuine inclusive communities in higher education. The program trained student ambassadors not to be disability advocates, but to be friendship facilitators. It organized events focused on shared interests rather than disability status. It created mentorship programs pairing students based on career goals and personal compatibility, not on who could help whom. Universities began competing to implement the most innovative See Me programs. Student satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvements not just among disabled students, but across entire campus communities. Major corporations took notice. Tech companies started consulting with Dante's team on accessibility, not just for legal compliance, but for market expansion and employee satisfaction. Within 6 months, the Kiss of Courage had evolved from a viral moment into a sustainable movement with measurable impact on how society approached human connection across all differences. But for Dante, the most meaningful change wasn't the numbers or the headlines. It was personal, and it was about to transform his business in ways he never expected. The transformation in Dante's approach to business wasn't immediate. It was evolutionary, like watching a seed grow into something entirely different from what you planted. 6 months after that graduation day encounter, Adaptive Solutions looked nothing like the tech company he'd originally built. The change started small. Instead of focusing solely on product development, Dante began hosting monthly community dinners at his office. These weren't networking events or product launches. They were simple gatherings where employees, customers, and community members shared meals and conversations without agenda. A software engineer might sit next to a customer using their gaming controller, not to gather feedback, but to talk about their shared love of mystery novels. The impact on company culture was immediate. Employees stopped seeing their work as just building products for disabled people and started understanding they were creating bridges between different human experiences. Innovation flourished when the team truly understood the people they serve as complete individuals, not just consumers with specific needs. Dante restructured the entire company around this philosophy. Instead of traditional focus groups, they created ongoing relationships with their user community. Instead of quarterly reports focused solely on profit margins, they tracked metrics around community engagement, employee satisfaction, and social impact. The business results were remarkable. Revenue increased by 300% in the first year after transformation, but not because they'd changed their products fundamentally. They'd changed their approach to relationships, and that authenticity translated into unprecedented customer loyalty and word-of-mouth marketing. Major competitors tried to replicate their community-focused model, but they missed a crucial element. Genuine care couldn't be manufactured or marketed. It had to be real. Dante's speaking career exploded, but again, not in the way he expected. Instead of the typical overcoming adversity speaking circuit, he found himself addressing Fortune 500 companies about authentic leadership, university business schools about stakeholder relationships, and healthcare conferences about patient dignity. His most popular talk, The Business Case for Seeing People, challenged audiences to consider how much potential they were wasting by reducing people to labels, job titles, or customer demographics. He'd share Mara's story not as inspiration, but as a case study in the practical value of genuine human connection. The personal transformation was even more profound. Dante started therapy, not because anything was wrong, but because he wanted to understand himself better. He learned to distinguish between the loneliness that came from his circumstances and the isolation he created through his own protective barriers. He began dating differently, too. Instead of elaborate first dates designed to impress, he suggested simple activities that revealed character: volunteering together, attending community events, having conversations without phones present. The quality of his relationships improved dramatically when he stopped trying to prove his worth and started simply being himself. Most importantly, his relationship with his disability evolved. For years, he'd seen his paralysis as something to overcome, minimize, or transform into inspiration for others. Through his work with Mara and the See Me movement, he began understanding his disability as simply one aspect of his complete human experience, neither his greatest challenge nor his defining characteristic. This shift changed everything about his content creation. His videos became less about disability tips and more about universal human experiences that happen to include disability. He talked about business strategies, relationship advice, travel recommendations, and social commentary, all from his perspective as a complete person who happened to use a wheelchair. His audience grew more diverse. Parents watched his content for entrepreneurship advice. College students followed him for career guidance. Other content creators studied his community-building techniques. He'd achieved what he'd always wanted: being seen as a whole person, not just an inspirational figure. The partnership with Amara deepened beyond their campus initiatives. She joined Adaptive Solutions as Director of Community Relations, bringing her natural gift for seeing people to the corporate world. Together, they consulted with organizations worldwide on creating inclusive cultures that went beyond compliance to genuine connection. Their friendship became a model for what authentic relationships could look like across different backgrounds and experiences. They supported each other through personal challenges, celebrated each other's victories, and demonstrated that meaningful connections could form in the most unexpected circumstances. 2 years after graduation, Dante returned to his university as the commencement speaker. But this time, he wasn't alone on that stage or in that audience. The See Me program had created a campus community where students with disabilities weren't isolated, where genuine friendships crossed all boundaries, where everyone belonged. As he looked out at the graduating class, Dante saw what he'd been missing that first graduation day: not just individual achievements, but a community of people who truly saw and supported each other. The boy who'd once felt invisible had become a man who helped others see and be seen. Today, Dante Harris runs a multi-million-dollar company that's changed the lives of countless people with disabilities. He speaks to packed auditoriums around the world. His social media reaches tens of millions of people monthly. By every measure society uses to define success, he's achieved it all. But if you ask Dante what transformed his life most, he wouldn't mention business deals, speaking fees, or follower counts. He'd tell you about a single mother who saw him sitting alone and chose to see the person behind the wheelchair. He'd talk about a gentle kiss on the forehead that reminded him what human connection actually feels like. He'd describe how one authentic conversation changed not just his perspective, but sparked a global movement that's still growing today. The truth is, we all walk through life surrounded by opportunities to be someone's Amara. Every day, we encounter people who feel invisible, misunderstood, or reduced to their circumstances instead of celebrated for their humanity. That person might be the colleague everyone assumes is unfriendly when they're actually struggling with social anxiety. The elderly neighbor who seems gruff but just misses having meaningful conversations. The classmate with a disability who gets accommodations but not genuine friendship. The successful person who is everything except someone who truly sees them. Dante's story isn't really about overcoming paralysis or building a business empire. It's about the transformative power of genuine human connection in a world that's forgotten how to truly see each other. The Kiss of Courage movement continues to grow because it addresses something we all need: to be seen, understood, and valued for who we are, not what we've achieved or overcome. So here's my challenge for you. Be someone's Amara this week. Look beyond the surface. Start a genuine conversation with someone who seems isolated. Offer recognition that goes deeper than accomplishments or circumstances. Show someone they matter simply because they're human. You don't need to change someone's entire life. You don't need to go viral or start a movement. You just need to have the courage to see someone who feels unseen. If this story moved you, hit that like button and let me know in a comment about a time when someone showed you unexpected kindness, or when you had the chance to be that person for someone else. Subscribe for more stories about real people creating real change through authentic human connection. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't measured by their achievements, but by their humanity. And remember, in a world obsessed with success metrics and social media validation, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply see someone for who they truly are. Because just like Dante discovered, the smallest gestures often create the biggest transformations, not just for the person receiving them, but for the person brave enough to offer them. That's the real legacy of the paralyzed TikTok influencer Millionaire, who found everything he was looking for in a moment of unexpected human kindness.